Hey everyone, my name is Angus Wright, and I also go by Angus by Design. And I am an advanced level facilitator of an evidence-based program called WRAP, or Wellness Recovery Action Plan. And my goal in this video is to provide a comprehensive overview of all of the components and opportunities that lie within wellness recovery action planning and the crisis plan. So I'm going to start out by talking about what is called 5 key concepts. And these are concepts that were prepared by a community of practice in the late 1990s. And this was overseen by Mary Ellen Copeland PhD, who a big part of her work was essentially addressing a time in her life when what was being offered to her in terms of support and care in the medical profession wasn't adequate for her, and so she needed to kind of take action for herself, and so she developed actually a system in order to do that, and then made some connections. So there was a conference in 1997, and so the key concepts were kind of born from that conference. And so this was made up of people who had lived experience with mental and physical health addictions, and who needed some supports when it came to being treated and receiving care from the community. So the first one was hope. And the idea and the concept of hope is that, it's one of those things that can help us to get well and stay well. And, when I first learned about this key concept, I really was in a place where I didn't feel a great deal of hope. But I've come to learn that hope is one of those things that we can aspire to, we can return to and recover to, but also that we can hold out for other people. And so for me, I really try to apply a lens of unlimited hope in any situation, especially when it's coming to taking action and making an advanced plan for myself. And so, and hope for me is really just having inspiration that whatever I'm experiencing in the moment, I can get through that, right? And again, I live with a situation where sometimes I can't feel that, or I can't see it, or it's been a while. And so it's really important for me to develop that for myself and to understand that. And then the next thing was talking about personal responsibility. And so essentially, personal responsibility is that concept of what is within my control and then what don't I have control over. So for me, I really love the personal Bill of Rights, for example, and the idea that everybody has a personal Bill of Rights, and that if I'm showing mutual high regard or mutuality in my support, then I'm really taking that under consideration as well. The third key concept was education. And while we know the general idea and the general consensus of what education is, this is really talking about what we can do and what I can do for myself to understand myself and understand what my needs are. And I love how these build upon each other because, again, starting with hope, there's no dire predictions that are needed in terms of recovering. We can truly believe that we can get over these things and that we can get to a better place. That's what the evidence points to. And then when it comes to knowing our rights, that's how we can educate ourselves. So understanding and knowing our rights in any given situation, knowing what is being said about us, even by the professionals, and then being able to really understand for ourselves what we need to do. And so self-advocacy is the next key. And self-advocacy is really the important component to making sure that our personal autonomy is what is being respected and dignified. And we all have the right to make our own decisions, just like everybody does. And so self-advocacy is really, by me, for me, not about me without me. It's about really just having the control and the power over what happens to us, even when we can't self advocate for ourselves. And that rolls into that fifth key concept, which is support. And what we've learned is that it's very important for us to understand and adopt what support means for us. And for me, I need to be specific in my support because I need a lot of support sometimes. And sometimes I don't need any. But being able to self advocate for it and to be able to understand the specific support that I need and developing a support system of at least 5 people, it really helps me to achieve a lot more. And this is like big and small when I'm making my plans. And so those were the 5 key concepts. And these are the foundations that go into everything that we do with RAP. Now, next thing you know, I want to just point out that this is an opportunity to be voluntary. And so, if there's resistance to these things, there's probably meaning and purpose behind that. And so, when we're developing a rap or we're supporting others to do it, it really is about volunteering and voluntary participation in that. Because if I'm not willing or I'm not in a space to be able to do it, that is what's really important. It can prevent a lot of crisis by understanding the voluntary needs for the development of this, because it's really about us, right? Um, Now we talk about wellness tools. Now these are safe and simple resources to help us stay well as those that help us to get well when we're not feeling well. And wellness tools are those affordable, accessible, achievable things that we can have in our own personal arsenal to get better. So I'm thinking about like, an example would be even my wallet. So when I look at my wallet, I can look at it from the sense of being a wellness toolbox. I have a little bit of cash in there just in case. I have my cards for debit and credit. I have my license and my health card. I have information in there that if I needed medical attention, I might have little tchotchkes. I have a couple of little tokens in there that I like to keep and hold on to when I need a tangible object. But I've also created I have a wellness bookshelf, which is a toolbox for me that's covered in all the materials that I need to inspire me out of where I'm feeling if I need to. So now these wellness tools, like this concept, right? This is what we're going to be rolling into our plans. And our plans essentially are looking at identifying signs and creating plans to help us get well and stay well. And so the first part of that is, first of all, really kind of having an idea of, well, what is it like when I'm feeling well? So really identifying those things and in a way that's meaningful for us. So yes, I have things that may cause me mental, physical, emotional, spiritual distress, but I do ultimately have good times and better times. And so really having a self-reflective idea of what that looks like helps to support building my plans. And for me personally, I know that I feel well when I'm comprehensive, when I'm engaging, when I'm feeling peaceful and my breathing is regulated, when my dog is chill, things like that. I can really kind of tell that I'm well when I'm outgoing and curious, right? And it's important for us to do that because for our own mind map, that's how we build off of everything else. And having a concept of our own wellness is key to that. Now, we then talk about what our daily maintenance looks like. And this is essentially things that we feel we may need to do every day to be well. Okay. And things that we may need to do to get well that way. And so essentially, our daily maintenance, at least for me, like I need to wake up without any outside influence, like in terms of news media or anything like that. So when I get up, I basically go and I go to the bathroom first thing. Then I go and I start to brew a pot of coffee and I start to boot up my computer so that I can do a mindfulness exercise. I hug my dog, I engage with him, I say good morning, and then I roll into a mindfulness cultivation practice and a spiritual practice that I have. And I also like to do a lot of journaling in the morning. Then I start to prepare for a group that I'm participating in. I go and attend that group, and then I roll out the rest of my day based on what energy is left, right? Or if I have appointments and such like that. So starting my way, the day that way, really does actually support me. And then I have to come up with a little bit of an idea of what I might do to get well and stay well on occasion. So it's having an additional list of, you know, kicking things in um, when I need to do that, right? So, and for me, those occasional things might be going for a walk at a park, going for a swim, going to visit a friend, taking a tour and going thrifting, things like that that I can do. I may not be able to access every day, but I can do from time to time. And then now we're starting to kind of like we've kind of covered off where we're reflecting on wellness and we're looking at those things we can do every day and sometimes. And now we're going to kind of roll into identifying our triggers. And triggers are really those things that are external to us, that are events and circumstances which are usually upsetting for us. And of course, we know we can have internal triggers. That's what we're kind of reflecting on, but they're the things that are kind of activated from the outside of us. And so for me, an external trigger might be if I sense conflict when I'm, in the line at the coffee shop. Another trigger for me is like any sense of injustice or animal, if I think an animal is in any kind of distress. And so in identifying those triggers, we then look at, well, how do we attach it to an action? And how do we create an action plan? And for me, the simplest thing is if, then. So if the trigger occurs, then I can do this. And I'm really building this off of my list of wellness tools and the things that I can do. And that's why I love the brainstorm. I love adding to it anytime I can. So for me, for example, so if I can't handle conflict, well, I'm also just going to try to be mindful of, where I spend my time and how I spend my time. So if I'm trying to avoid conflict, then I'm going to stick to task. If I'm trying to avoid conflict, I'm going to try to diffuse a situation and then set up a time to talk about it when we've both calmed down. So if I am not up for cruelty to animals, well, then I'm gonna make sure that everybody knows that I really prefer not to know about those things, or I don't want to see videos or any of those things that imply. And I really don't want to see like missing animal posters all the time and stuff like that. When I'm engaging in spaces, I get to kind of determine what I'm exposed to. So then now we're going to kind of talk about, we know what sets us off. Now we want to reflect on what are those early warning signs. So instead of, going in full throttle at a 5, what are those things at around a 1 or a 2 where we can start to identify what, when things may happen? And some triggers happen suddenly. We can also kind of create plans for that. But sometimes we know things are bubbling and brewing based on the cycles of our experience, right? And so those are the things that are just not quite right in getting an idea around that. So what I try to do is I try to write things down and I try to pin it to those daily maintenance things that I can do. and to those things that I might need to do every once in a while. So those daily maintenance things, those easygoing things, I call it like recovery by 1,000 paper cuts or band-aids, right? So it's the idea of what are those small micro affirmational things that I can do to kind of keep the peace and keep the balance within myself. And I'm creating action plans around that. So if every day it helps me out to go for a little walk and see a certain thing, well, then I'm going to go for a little walk and see a certain thing. If I need a cup of coffee or whatever, then I'm going to have a cup of coffee. These are the things that I can do for self-love and self-care. Nah, and then we're going to look at when things are breaking down. So this is around the time where it's critical that we take immediate and deliberate action for our wellness. And so these are the signs when, we've done the things that we can normally do in our daily maintenance. We've maybe tried to take steps and actions to kind of turn the beat around, so to speak. And now we're actually trying to kick into higher gear. So that's why I really love that things we might do once in a while. So, I'm really kind of going, okay, whatever's working isn't working. I'm really going to need to take a half-hour walk in a park. I'm really going to have to turn off my devices for an hour. I'm really going to have to phone my family or phone my friends and be like, you know what, I could use some TLC and some love here. And really doing those deliberate actions to turn it around, right? We want to reduce the number of choices we're making, because for me, when things are breaking down, I'm getting a little more foggy. My resources are shutting down internally, so to speak. So I really want to have deliberate action in these circumstances to avoid that crisis. And then, so we're really kind of looking at when things are breaking down, signs, looking at the behaviors or that we or others might engage in around that time. And we want to take charge, right? And we may want to kind of look at what the input from others are, even if it's negative. They may not be correct, but they can definitely point to clues as to patterns in how we're getting reactions, right? And so that's where we kind of roll into now, where we're going into examining our crisis plans. So our crisis plans so now we've kind of done a bunch of reflective stuff, and this is where we start to actually put it to paper, so to speak. And these are documents that tell others what we want from them and to do what we want for them to do for us to take care of us when we can't take care of our needs ourselves. And that might just be advocating on our behalf. It might be speaking to our doctors or other people. But these are the things that we get to put into play here. And again, it's like these are meant to keep us in control, even if it feels like things are out of control or we can't really make good decisions for ourselves. And so these are all the things that we've thought about when we put into our wrap. And it's also helping us at this point, like all those steps we've taken so far. This is really what helps us define what crisis means to us specifically. So for me, a crisis is just anything that I just don't want to experience. It's like emotions, it's physical, it can be situational. These are just situations that are above and beyond my capacity, right? And then looking at how, going back and adapting what we're like when we're well, to avoid having those things and people who we don't want making, assumptions about us or saying things that just don't resonate within us. And we want to be looking at our list of supporters and really identifying who can do what for us, because that's this, when we're looking at our crisis, this is when we want people who are going to do what we would like them to do, because we don't want to create division even within our own care, right? And so we also need to kind of reflect on medications. So, our plans allow us to decide what medications we need or don't need in terms of what's working for us or not working for us, maybe things we've tried in the past. And this is really trying to reflect in a way that's non-judgmental. So medications can also include holistic approaches to like vitamins and supplements. And for me personally, I don't want to go through psychiatric, testing of medications like I have in the past. Those things create more distress and discomfort in me. I'd like to take a more natural approach to how I get treated. So this is those areas where I can explain to my doctor what my values and ethics are and ask for them to support me in that. Next section is explaining treatments. So these are our personal preferences, acceptability and unacceptability, and then looking at, what are the alternative therapies and complementary therapies that we can have. So for me, massage, Reiki, mindfulness, yoga, these are things that help me out. So instead of going directly to medication or instead of trying to enforce a situation on me when I'm resisting, offering these kind of tools and resources is very helpful for me. So I want to be able to list the ones that work or don't work. Sometimes mindfulness and body work stuff doesn't, like, people don't want to do that or they've never heard of it. So they may have preconceived notions. So this is where we get to kind of reflect and reflect our personalities. Then we kind of want to explore home care options. So, what are the options that are going to keep us out of hospital? What's going to keep us out of having to go into emergency crisis? Maybe it's staying with a friend. Maybe it's having, resources to have a hotel for a couple of days. These are the home care, out of hospital options that we might want to look at. And then we want to kind of roll into the treatment facilities we would be open to and those that we don't. With issues like residential housing and schools and prisoning, like people who have dealt with imprisonment or who have felt sort of like oppressed or trapped in a way. Well, we really want to be able to find facilities that aren't going to create further distress for us. So this is where we get to look at that. For me, I don't mind going to a mental institution, but after a certain period of time, I start to take into a different identity as if I'm somehow hopeless. Whereas, having a home care situation, it really, really, really reinforces that I have choices and options, right? And then we're talking about, well, what does help from others look like? So we're talking about, should it become necessary, things that could be included or avoided in our help from others. So we may have to exclude people or things that people might try to do for us, and we may need to be very specific, right? And then we also we want to look at, what does it look like when we're coming out of crisis or we're inactivating the plan. So it's also taking into account ahead of time in an advanced directive way what people need to know in order to stop or to adjust, right? And so, and then basically we want to look at, we may choose to then go on and create what's called a PAD, or a psychiatric advanced directive, or a medical advanced directive, just to communicate that. And in Ontario and in Canada, for example, we call it a personal attorney for care. So it's like legalizing those documents. And that really ranges depending on where you're at too. So, and then essentially we want to reach an agreement with our supporters about the plan and the implementation. We want to share copies of our crisis plan with them. And we want to also make sure that we're keeping our plan current. Now, our post-crisis plan, in terms of the traditional time when we're getting over a hard time and working towards a better time, that's what really helps us to in like to activate the post-crisis plan and to know when to resume full duties. And then essentially we want to create a timetable so it gives everybody an idea of what to look for and when to check in so it doesn't become overwhelming perhaps. And so that's literally the overview of RAP and all the key components of it. So again, my name's Angus, and I also go by Angus by Design. And I say that I'm an advocate for human potential because I just really appreciate the work that Mary Ellen Copeland and the whole community put into these wonderful tools and resources. I'm thankful for the AHP Press bookstore that keeps the books going and makes them available for people. But I'm also just so thankful for how many ways and how many places and times throughout history, more than 25 years now, where people have put these tools to work. So thank you so much, and do keep in touch. Be well.